Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from France, French language English subs, released in the year 2022, directed by Gregory Bacon, and this film is called Deep Fear. So Deep Fear is about a group of friends who want to send their friend who's going to military service off on a high note. They're going to give him an evening that he'll never forget, but unfortunately when they're out on the town, they just can't find anything interesting enough until they come across an acquaintance at a nightclub who says he has what they're looking for. He has access to unexplored territory in the Catacombs, which is a massive tomb, labyrinth-like maze underneath the city of Paris, and this is something that a lot of tourists go to see, but he's going to take them off the tourist path into very unknown territory. So this is the thrill that they're looking for, and so when they go into the catacombs, they get a lot more than they bargained for because they end up being trapped and they stumble upon something that they wish they'd never have because now they're being stalked by a great danger. So what that danger is and whether or not they survive this night of survival is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Deep Fear. For those of you who are aware of my channel, you know that French horror is so important to me. Now when I was 8 years old, I first watched The Exorcist, and that what really got me into horror. That was something I hadn't seen before, it shocked me, and that is definitely the first film that really got me into this genre, and this is the reason why I love the genre. So that was an extreme film, it was a film that really took me off guard, and being 8 years old I wasn't supposed to see it, but I saw it, and this is the reason why I'm into horror. So The Exorcist was my first very important horror film, but then for a very long time I was very disheartened with the genre. I thought as though it was very tame and it just really wasn't going anywhere. But then, and that was until in the 2000s when I come across a horror film called Inside. Now this is a French horror film that really started the French New Wave. And Inside, Martyrs, Frontiers and High Tension are very important films to me because it reignited my passion. So between the year 2000 and 2010, French horror was really on its game. It was testing audiences with the endurance and what they're capable of and the extremity, pulling no punches and making no apologies. And so it's definitely something that really breathed new life into the horror genre. But then unfortunately after 2010 they have gone quiet, and this is because a lot of these directors have gone over to the United States. They've watered themselves down because the Hollywood curse, the studios want to make money, and they're not going to make as much money if they're extreme. They're going to make more money if it's PG-13. So this is the reason why they've gone very quiet, and I've been waiting for that French horror film to really ignite my passion. There have been a few movies that have been decent, but no real film that has actually captured me like these movies that I've just previously mentioned. And so coming into Deep Fear, whenever I get a new French horror film, I'm always very, very excited. Even though I don't have massive expectations, I'm still hoping that I can just have that same feeling that I had when I first watched Inside. So Deep Fear, this is set in the catacombs. I really like the catacombs as a horror setting. It's a massive tomb, and so it's definitely ideal. There was a movie called As Above, So Below that was set in the catacombs that I thought was fantastic. And so coming into Deep Fear, when I saw the trailer, I thought, all right, well, what does Gregory Bacon have up his sleeve? And hopefully it was going to be something very surprising. And after finally watching Deep Fear, I will say that I was very disappointed. Now that's not saying that it's a bad film. It's very serviceable. It's definitely worth watching, but it just doesn't have all that memorable quality because I always felt as though when it took one step forward, there were two steps back. So with every positive, there were two negatives, and I never really felt it could break out of its shell. I never really felt as though it used its potential because there was those little nagging negatives that always felt slightly distracting. And so that's something I'll go into a little bit later, but what I really liked about this film was the setting. It's a very claustrophobic setting. It's in a maze-like atmosphere, and so if you are a claustrophobic individual, you're not going to like this film. It actually made me feel very uncomfortable, and I'm not claustrophobic, but it just had those really tight moments where I just felt as though all the air was being sucked out of you, and I just felt that sense of desperation and that sense of panic. And so the movie in the first half has a lot of panic. I thought as though it had a light psychological ability to really have you on the edge of your seat, even though something not particularly scary as far as traditional horror is taking place. So whether it's people being trapped in a very tight environment, whether it's people being trapped in a very vulnerable environment, that these are part of the catacombs that have never been explored, and so it's not a tourist area, and so are they in trouble, or is it something that's just playing on their mind? And so it does create that mental monster that I feel a lot of films out there have been able to produce. But I thought, how is this movie going to cap all of that sense of anticipation off? You know that something is down there, but what is it? And I was hoping that this movie was really going to capitalise upon it and send a rewarding quality that would actually make this movie even better than it was. But unfortunately, as I said, there are reasons that I'll go into a little bit later that really made me feel slightly disappointed. And so the whole film has a really good sense of cinematography. The production levels are pretty high, and I thought the characters were actually fairly likeable. There were no really annoying individuals, although it's more a young adult sort of film. I never felt as though I wanted a particular person to die. And so although I didn't overly care about them, I still didn't hate them to a point where I wanted to see them die. So that fear factor is always there. I thought the catacombs looked pretty cool. Unfortunately, I feel as though the majority of this movie wasn't actually shot in the catacombs. It was actually shot in a studio setting. And so the movie does want to make you believe you're in the catacombs, but I never fully believed that I was actually in there. So that was slightly disappointing. But as I said, there was enough claustrophobic and psychological tension in the film to actually compensate for that, but I never really felt, as I said, I was in the catacombs. And so if you like films such as The Descent, I definitely feel as though you'll get something out of Deep Fear. It does play on you psychologically, which is something I definitely feel was a welcome surprise. There are a few gory scenes, but it's not overly gory. If you're comparing it to films like Martyrs, High Tension, Inside and Frontiers, this is a very tame film, but I felt as though it is violent, but it does have that psychological impact that I definitely feel is very hard to achieve, but I felt Gregory Beehan actually did a fairly good job at that, and that's the reason why I would say go out there and watch. But unfortunately, the movie really falls down upon the reveal. Now, the reveal is very silly. The reveal has been done many times before, and it just didn't work. I felt as though the last quarter of the movie was a completely different film to all the anticipation. It's like it's building itself up for a massive reveal, and when you finally see the reveal, you think, is that it? And you feel that sense of disappointment. You feel as though something was much bigger around the corner. And so when it actually reveals itself, it doesn't have the capability to actually shock you. It doesn't have the capability to really make you feel as though you're watching a really good horror film. I just felt as though it was a completely different film. It was a movie that does go down a slasher type of experience. And it's an experience that really contradicts the anticipation and the psychology that the first 3/4 of the movie had. And so it's promising a big surprise, but when you actually see the surprise, it's not that surprising. And I felt as though that was a massive letdown. There was also, as I said, a letdown with the catacombs. I never really felt like they were down there, and the catacombs is one of the most interesting places on earth, but I never really felt that they had the access to the actual catacombs to make a horror film, because a lot of this movie, especially in the last quarter, you forget it is in the catacombs, and so that was a massive disappointment. I thought there were a lot of elements in this movie that were introduced that could have actually been really good. I'm not going to give too much away, but there is a scene with skinheads, and I thought if they actually delved into that a little bit more, it could have been very, very scary, but they don't really concentrate on that. And so there's a lot of really high potential moments, but the potential is never really utilised to a point where I felt as though it was rewarding. I felt, as I said, it's very serviceable, but it's only one-time viewing, but I couldn't help but feel it should have been a lot more than it actually was. And so production-wise, it is very crisp looking. I thought as though you could do a lot worse, but it's definitely not a movie that's going to reinvent French horror, and it's a movie that after you watch it once, you're never really going to watch again. So overall for Deep Fear, going to give this one 2.5 stars, serviceable, but only that. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.